Rasmus,
Yes.
imagine being 5 years old and the psychologist is standing there, holds up $2 and says, "Tell me which is good and which is bad." Sounds pretty easy, right? It sounds pretty harmless.
Yeah, until you realize the only real difference between these dolls is their skin color.
Yeah, that sounds pretty dark, but unfortunately, that's the uncomfortable subject of today's test, the Clark doll test. This is a psychology test that was done in the 1940s, and the purpose was to see, if there was kind of like a built-in racial prejudice at a young age for children. I'm Jaden.
And I'm Rasmus.
And we are hosts today. Thank you for watching the Jay-Z podcast. Thank you for coming back. I know this is a little bit different from our usual topics, but we are here to talk about a little psychology today. So with that being said, let's jump right in.
To start it off, we're going to dive into what area of social psychology this Clark doll test is. So basically, we determined that it fits into the area of prejudice and social cognition, and it's basically how society influences the way people and especially kids think about race and how they think about themselves.
Yeah, the test was created in 1940 in the 1940s by the psychologists Kenneth and Marie and Mamie. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but Mamie Clark. That was the Clark doll test. That was named after, and they were trying to figure out how segregation affected Black children, and their self-esteem and that kind of stuff. Specifically because there was a lot of segregation in schools at that time. Schools were segregated, and they were trying to figure out, if it was actually hurting kids. The segregation part. Spoiler alert, it was. The goal was basically to see, whether Black children had started to believe negative ideas about their own race. Basically, does living in a racist society, affect how the kids are seeing themselves?
So basically, to cover how the experiment worked, kids between 3 and 7 years old were placed in a room and shown 4 different dolls. 2 of the dolls were white, 2 of the dolls were black. They had the same clothes, same faces, same everything except for their skin color. The researchers then asked questions like which doll is nice, which doll is bad, which doll is pretty, and which doll is ugly. These were pretty basic questions, but the answers were not basic at all. Our experiment, or the Clark doll experiment, ended up measuring racial preference and self-image in these kids. Not just intelligence, not just behavior, but how the kids actually felt about race and themselves.
The Clarks believed in their hypothesis that segregation would cause Black children to develop lower self-esteem and that they might even see being white as being better, even at such a young age. And the results were that most of the kids ended up choosing, the white dolls as good. Most of them, labeled the Black dolls as bad. And when some kids were asked, which doll looks like you, specifically being the Black doll, implying you look like it, they would get upset. They would get upset about it. They'd get upset because they didn't like that. And that kind of says a lot,
Mm-hmm. All right. So as for the question of whether it was ethical or not, by today's standards, not really. The kids definitely seemed very uncomfortable and confused, which raises a lot of ethical questions. And then at the time, the study kind of exposed a real problem that people were ignoring. Yeah. So at the time, it was probably more ethical than it would be today. But overall, not really.
Looking back at it, it's definitely controversial. Some people say that the results aren't necessarily perfect because of the small sample size used. And also, a big argument is that it might have hurt the kids in some way, especially their self-esteem, being forced to think about, what do I look like these? Do I like them or not? Being forced to think about these questions that they might not have otherwise. So it's definitely controversial to look back on it too. Yeah,
I would say so.
This study was important for a few reasons. It showed that segregation doesn't just, separate people physically. It hurts the kids, mentally and their self-esteem. And it also shows that kids, pick up on society's messages, what's being put out there way earlier than people think. And that, if you're putting them into a world of racism, that's what they learn. That's what they grow up in. That's what they believe in. And, a little fun fact, this study was actually used and quoted in the Brown versus Board of Education trial in 1954, where they argued that segregation wasn't ethical in schools because it was hurting the kids' self-esteem and and it was causing them damage that it's irreparable damage to their self-esteem. So that's a fun fact. Another fun fact is that it's actually this study while it's controversial and unethical to do, it's been recreated on TV more than one time. It's been recreated on TV just to show the effects of it. So my dog made a little appearance.
So as for what it says about human social interaction, it shows that people don't really, and kids also don't really form beliefs in a vacuum. They learn from their environment, from schools, from media, and the way society treats different people. Those lessons especially can stick for a long time if they are kids, as kids absorb a lot more information. Right. So they're really just influenced, and they learn from this.
And after all this, the Clarks actually opened up a mental health center to try and do their part in helping reverse all this stuff. So that's one more fun fact for you. But yeah, the Clark doll test isn't some old psychology experiment.
Right.
It's proof that the way society treats people, especially kids, and the way you portray how to treat people in public, it matters. It makes an impression on them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's something definitely worth talking about.
It's definitely worth talking about, yeah. Well, once again, I'm Jaden.
And I'm Razis.
And thank you for listening. This video was sponsored by Spindrift Sparkling Water.
Yep. Thank you to Spindrift.
See you guys in the next one.